of approach, and it has the following, which we'll be exploring today. Dear Burt, isn't it true that you get to know that you are the Spirit only when grace is bestowed upon you? I see that from you and many other teachers I know who have the grace of Bhagwan, it's easy to get to know that you are the Self and nothing matters. On the other hand, I'm in the midst of turmoil and worries, and the only tool I have are the articles and materials that I can read, but inside I'm still going through the agony of my ego being shot, as I don't have the voice or blessing continuously reminding me that I'm there. It's a catch-22, and I'm so confused that it takes a heavy toll on my health. It's like a spiral that I'm unable to get out of. What is going on? What did I do? Believe me, it's a common one. Okay? So we have to discover first what is grace. It's true. Awakening happens through grace. But what is grace? It's every moment when there is no self-concern. You hit moments when everything is just perfect. There's no self-concern, there's no ego at the moment. You hit moments like that. When you're in love, you're in a moment like that. Or you're in love with a flower, with a puppy, it doesn't matter, with a song. And at that moment, you just feel like flowing. Grace is that flow. And it's every moment when we learn to understand it through surrender. Okay? So that's the topic today. I would like to discuss surrender. Now, surrender is misunderstood. It's not giving up anything. It's giving in to that which you are, to that which you truly are. Okay? If you understand surrender, there's nothing else to understand. That's it, ipso facto, that's it. If you understand surrender, that is all you need to understand. Now, what is surrender? You know, we see many sportsmen practice and practice and practice to be their best. You see? But what makes them their best? Let's take a sailor. Okay? And he's an expert sailor. And he's in his sailboat. What makes him so expert? Because he knows how the wind is blowing. He doesn't control the boat. He doesn't control the wind. He goes along with the wind to take him where he wants to go. That's surrender. When I was young, when I was younger, I was an athlete. At one point, I was an athlete of the year, as a matter of fact. And I used to love track and field. One of the things that I used to do very, very well was high jump. And I used to visualize myself just floating over. And it used to be quite high, you know the one with the poles and okay. And I used to take a running jump, and I used to see myself gliding over it. And the question whether I would do it or not never entered my mind. Well, to make a long story short, one day I was asked by our sports manager, what is the secret? And I didn't have any secret. I just said, well, I just see myself flowing over. I just see it so clearly, and there's no question. And then he made a statement that destroyed everything. He said, I guess there aren't any better than you. Well, I bought it. I thought I was better than others. The moment I thought I was better, that was the end of my track and field expertise. And believe it, this is true. And I was young at the time, but I could never quite make it as high as I used to, because the thought occurred to me that I am better. You see? So I became self-concerned. See, this is what surrender is. You enter a moment when there is no self-concern, and there is as a higher force takes over. You see? Surrender is not something you do. Surrender is an understanding, seeing very clearly. There are two kinds of surrender: conscious surrender and unconscious surrender. Now let's discuss unconscious surrender, because it's happening all the time. It's unconscious. Unconscious surrender means that it happens when every time you act, think, walk, eat, sleep, or do anything. It's all unconscious surrender. Did you know that? Very few people are aware of that. We're unconsciously surrendering all the time. Suppose you put a morsel of food in your mouth and you start thinking, maybe I can swallow it. You know you can choke? Because swallowing is unconscious surrender. And then it's assimilated, distributed, you see? It knows what to do. It is digested and then eventually eliminated. It's all done unconsciously. Okay? In other words, without our need to think about it or control it. Then unconscious surrender. It's the same with anything. Suppose you're going down the stairs, which you do every day, but there are 100 stairs, you see? This time you start thinking about your feet. You'll trip. Did you know that? Because it's not unconscious surrender. You see, now when we say unconscious, means that you're not thinking about it. That's the reason we say unconscious. It means it's being done without you doing it. It's become a habit. Okay? And we can talk, we can go into unconscious surrender about every facet of life. Whether it's sitting down, whether it's standing, whether it's walking. We take everything for granted. We do not realize the power of our being doing everything through us. But of course we think it's us doing it. Even thinking happens to us. Even emotions happen to us. Many times you get depressed. You don't say, well, I think I'm going to get depressed now. Everything happens to us. And this is where surrender comes in. You see? Conscious surrender. The very understanding of what is taking place. And that understanding, you know, because in all the great teachings say surrender, surrender. You see? Surrender really also means making a shift. You are a human being. The human is part of what we call the egoic self. That's always involved with thinking. Always becoming, needing, wanting, striving. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the human. It's always becoming, becoming, becoming. It never arrives, but it's always becoming. You see? Because even when you arrive, you want $1 million. When you get $1 million, you want more. Right? So it's never enough. The being is. Be. No, the big question, to be or not to be. You see? That is the whole crux of the matter. Being itself is complete. Being is surrender. The human does not want to surrender. I want to get my own way. I want to be in control. So who is it that surrenders? You see? No one. You cannot surrender because the human will not surrender and the being does not need to. So what is it that happens in surrender? Understanding it. And that's what we're doing today. Okay, understandings. Because once you understand surrender, I'm repeating myself, that is the whole point. So how do we come to the point of understanding surrender? There is one thing that has to be made very, very clear. There is only one will. There isn't your will and his will or her will or God's will. There's only one will. Course in Miracles, incidentally, if you're familiar with that, makes it very, very clear. There's only one will. The will of that which is. You can call it the will of God, the will of the divine. There's only one will. You might say, well, what about my will? What is your will? And it is the one will when you get down to it. So here we come to a very crucial point. What is it that you want more than anything? Now some people say, I know what I want. 99.9% you don't. even though you say you do.